Bring you more then on that phone call between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. First of all, let's listen to the reaction to it, or a little bit more detail from the White House.
Let me just give you a couple of top lines on the call. It lasted about 30 minutes. It was 30 minutes long. It was direct. It was productive. Obviously, the call that the president had with the Prime Minister of Israel. They discussed a range of issues. So as you all know, the U.S. and the Israeli government have had discussion since last week. Certainly since after the Iran attack. And so those discussions continued with the president and the prime minister.
Yeah, a bit more there on the phone call from the White House. Well, let's talk now to our international affairs editor, Philip Tell. Philip, what do you think the relationship is between these two men? Do they get on with each other?
Well, judging from that phone call and what the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, was saying about it, you think they did get on with each other. I think that was a very diplomatic reply. But the bottom line is that Joe Biden is becoming increasingly frustrated with the behavior of Benjamin Netanyahu. He feels that the Israeli Prime Minister isn't listening to what he is telling him, and that every time he comes up with some kind of policy decision that could end the conflict in the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu simply just won't listen and carries on doing whatever he wants to do. Now, the problem is twofold. The first one is that this is weakening the image of Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who's at the end of his presidency, he wanted to get the situation in the Middle East sorted out before he left the White House. He's going to leave behind a mess with increased numbers of U.S. troops there, U.S. ships based in the region, and the threat of conflict, direct conflict with Iran, which is something that he doesn't want, and he's made it pretty clear that it's not in anybody's interest that there's a wider conflict in the region, but we're still waiting for an eventual strike by the Israelis on an Iranian site. On top of that, there's another problem. The second problem is that Joe Biden is frightened the conflict in the Middle East is also going to affect Kamala Harris's chances of winning the White House next month, because many Arab American voters are dissatisfied and disappointed with the stance taken by Joe Biden to support Israel all the way through the conflict over the past year in the Gaza Strip, and not been more robust in his criticism of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And so we're in a situation where the two have had a phone call. This is the first phone call for weeks on end, which is also a sign that they have not been talking. And there have been remarks which have been traded, but not directly, between the two of them. And Joe Biden has come up with several calls for ceasefires. They've been ignored. There was a call for a ceasefire by the United States in the southern Lebanon, which was also called upon by France and the European Union and the United Nations. Benjamin Netanyahu is reported to have agreed to that before going to the UN a couple of weeks ago, and then standing at the UN and saying that he wasn't going to take any notice of that ceasefire deal because he was going to launch a ground invasion into southern Lebanon, which he has since done. So a lot of frustration on the part of Joe Biden.
Let's not forget, of course, it also comes just one day after the disclosure in the journalist Bob Woodward's new book, War. We talked about this yesterday. President Biden has privately made his frustration and distrust of the Israeli leader known, it says in the book.
Well, if you need the proof, buy the book and read the quotes. They're quite explanatory. One of them calls Netanyahu a son of a bitch and a bad guy with an F word in the middle, which I won't translate for you. And the second one in the book is talking about Netanyahu had been lying to Joe Biden regularly and continuing to say that he was going to kill every last member of Hamas. Biden's reported in the book to have told Netanyahu that that was absolutely impossible, threatening both privately and publicly to withhold offensive US weapons shipments. There's been no comment on that by the White House, by Karine Jean-Pierre, but I think it's pretty true to say that those comments were probably made by President Biden, and it shows once again the purest frustration that he is going through right now in trying to rein in the Israeli Prime Minister, who has not been reined in by the four presidents he's worked with, be it President Clinton, Obama, Trump, or Biden. So Joe Biden is just the next in the line where Benjamin Netanyahu basically says one thing and then decides what he wants to do and does what he wants afterwards.